camera. You give it off, give it, down.
Hello everyone, I'm Alex Navarro and welcome to another edition of Half Good here on Screen.com. This is where we, the editors, take movies that, for one reason or several, simply don't work, and yet remain compelling and memorable enough to not be immediately dismissible either. These are films that offer up as many intriguing details as they do problematic ones. They're, you know, half good. In honor of Rory's desire to celebrate the home video release of The King's Speech, and thus all things royal in film, I felt it apropos of something to take a look back at Sofia Coppola's 2006 French royal biopic, Marie Antoinette. Antoinette is a film that, after walking out of the theater, I straight up hated. Coppola's concept of a new wave costume drama seemed an interesting confection, but the end result left a pretty bitter taste in my mouth. And yet, unlike so many other dismissively lousy biopics, Antoinette stuck with me over the years, which made me think that at some point I really ought to give it a second shot. So I did, and what I discovered was a movie that I still didn't really altogether care for, but I managed to find more positive qualities in than I'd originally believed existed. It is a film that works and fails in truly equal measure. Marie Antoinette, as many know, is the former Queen of France who famously found herself on the wrong end of a guillotine following a fairly decadent, spend-heavy life prior to the French Revolution. She's the one who, in regards to the starving people of France, famously said, "Let them eat cake." Except she actually didn't, but that's not really the point.
Such nonsense. I would never say that.
The point is that Coppola's film tries to be the anti-stuffy period drama. While all the pomp and costuming is there, the movie plays more like a pop video than a merchant ivory joint. Coppola infuses her directorial style into an 18th century story, and the resulting film is really weird, actually. The good, the concept. Coppola's vision for Marie Antoinette is nothing if not incredibly creative. How often have we been subjected to 3-hour snooze fests filled with people in powdered wigs and gigantic gowns and just dudes standing around looking incredibly important and or snooty? Nearly all of the actors are American or English. The cinematography veers between sharp stylistic shots and dreamy ethereal sequences. And the soundtrack, arguably the film's best feature, runs the gamut from strings and harpsichords to a mix of post-punk and new wave favorites, including Gang of Four, The Cure, Bow Wow Wow, and Susie and the Banshees. One moment in the film where all these things come together in perfect harmony is this masked ball scene, where the strings morph from a rendition of Susie's Hong Kong Garden into actual Hong Kong Garden, while the camera sweeps across the floor and we see these decadent, spoiled royals having the time of their lives. The bad, execution. Though not literally the execution, the film's execution. Now, as great as this concept is, only rare moments like that party sequence really make, like, proper good on it. Too much of Marie Antoinette feels distant and airless. Rarely do the vibe of the soundtrack and the action on screen really mesh, and Coppola's script doesn't offer enough insight into Antoinette's psyche beyond the notion that she was apparently not all that bad of a lady, just kind of naive and misguided, not to mention sexually frustrated by her famously unwilling to consummate husband.
It's all right.
I'm sorry.
It's all right.
At worst, she's kind of a flighty party girl, a sort of more artistic precursor to Paris Hilton. She's surrounded by important things that afford her a life of luxury, but she seems also relatively uninterested or willfully ignorant of their goings-on. Coppola's decision to keep the inner workings of the eventual revolution, not to mention the backstabbing politics at a distance from the many, many scenes of people eating, drinking, gambling, and occasionally frolicking, makes for a very different kind of biopic, but not necessarily a more eminently watchable one. The good, visuals. Marie Antoinette did win one Oscar, and it was for costuming. It's easy to see why when you lay eyes on the dresses, pantaloons, and fancy wigs these actors are sporting. It's amazing costume work, made all the more gorgeous by the locations and cinematography by Lance Accord, who also shot Coppola's previous movie, Lost in Translation. As I said before, there are some amazing sweeping shots here, many of which involve the Palace of Versailles, where Marie Antoinette once dwelled during her tenure as queen. Coppola actually got an incredible amount of access to the palace, which has rarely been filmed to the degree it is here. Apparently the caretaker of the palace actually happens to be a huge Coppola fan, so he gave her the access she wanted. It's good to be a critically acclaimed director, isn't it? The bad, the cast. While Coppola's decision to cast almost zero French actors or actresses in the movie isn't necessarily a bad one by itself, the cast she did choose is kind of a dud. Chief dud among them is Kirsten Dunst, whose slender, fragile physique may have embodied the kind of vulnerable girl Coppola wanted for her Antoinette, but whose flat inflection and morose line readings rarely inject the kind of free-spirited energy Coppola seems to be after.
Where will I be if there's a rupture between our two families? Am I to be Austrian or the Dauphine of France?
Other actors inject more energy, albeit in a much hammier way. Trust me when I say you ain't lived until you've seen Rip Torn play the King of France or Molly Shannon in a giant classical wig. Judy Davis is particularly over the top, stodgy, as the mistress tasked with teaching Antoinette how to be a proper princess.
Rights of entry are given to members of the High Court. Major rights to princesses of the blood and mistresses of the household.
There are some better performances, including Steve Coogan as Antoinette's sole tie to her homeland of Austria, and Rose Byrne, of all people, playing a delightfully ditzy and party-hardy duchess. Even Jason Schwartzman has his moments as the painfully shy King Louis XVI, but again, the star of the show is supposed to be Dunst, and her bland demeanor isn't nearly enough to carry this film's concept to its foregone conclusion.
I will see to it that my mistresses are off at once.
Indeed, Marie Antoinette is, all things considered, a failure. But it's an ambitious, strange, and in fleeting moments, kind of amazing failure. It is simultaneously too punk and not punk enough to embody Coppola's vision of a modernized period drama, and while I think the effort is applaudable, the actual film itself isn't. And that's gonna do it for this episode of Half Good. Why don't you allemande your way toward the comments and tell us what you think of Marie Antoinette? Is it moitié bon, or is it moitié mauvais? Do you even know what I just said? I barely know what I just said, but you know what? I know I just said more French words than anyone in this entire movie. Zing! Or should I say, les zing. We'll see you next time.